Okay, so I'm going to be talking about GenAI today and just AI in general. I know there are a lot of AI experts in the room. There actually are some, including a professor of AI. Steve, just raise your hand. If you guys want the real deal, go chat to Steve. Okay, so let's get into it. So I'm going to be talking a little bit from a scene setting point of view, just around global growth and attitudes towards it. I'm going to give some practical examples, and then I'm going to try and zero in on the marketing AI tool sets, looking at life beyond ChatGPT, and some of the image generators, and just talk about some of the things that you can use today from a marketing point of view that can add value in your lives. So there's this great study from Stanford around state of AI. Charts from 2022. What's really cool about this is it's a set of charts that kind of ends just before ChatGPT, because I don't really want to, like, the graph changes direction after that, but it's good to see the overall trend, right? So just looking at this, this is employment of AI PhDs in North America, and you can see a massive boom in the blue, which is industry. So industry from 2016 really started ramping up employment of AI PhDs, and most likely also the output from universities of AI PhDs. How many of you remember this moment? It was pretty heartbreaking for me because I actually play Go, and I'm not saying that as a flex, although I acknowledge that it's kind of flex, but it was kind of the last frontier of human intelligence, I think, was being able to beat a computer at Go. And now we can not necessarily do that anymore. So this was Lee Sedol, who was essentially the world champion of Go at the time. Go is a very complicated game with many factors, more potential iterations than something simple like chess. And Google and AlphaGo basically destroyed him in this series of matches. And there's a documentary that you can watch about this that's really interesting. I think it's on Netflix, which is super depressing because you realize the moment humanity kind of became partially obsolete. But that's what happened in 2016. Now, just looking at some of the potential challenges, right? So this is a graph of race and ethnicity of the AI PhDs being employed in their previous graph. So you can see a particular set of characteristics and a set of values and a set of cultural backgrounds that come into the actual fabric of creation of AI. And there have been a lot of conversations, I think, around inbuilt bias, what kind of sort of ideologies become part of the feedback that you get from AIs. And there's a lot of discussion around particularly issues around culture, race, geographic background, and so on. More interestingly, this is a view of private investment, and here you can see it also starts to tick up from 2016 and then really gets going in 2021. And I think for all of us who were kind of on the Web3 sort of mission, all the VC money went from Web3 to AI in a year. So it's quite an interesting set of shifts that are happening there from an investment perspective. This is a view of how many AI publications by field, and you can see things like ML, pattern recognition. These are things that are really growing very, very fast at the moment. So there's a lot going on in the space, and it's accelerating, and the acceleration is accelerating. You can see here from the number of AI patent filings, right? So clearly, this is not something that just happened last year when ChatGPT came out. It's been building for a very long time, and is hitting the peak now. What ChatGPT really was, I think, was that moment where that blockchain potentially hasn't had yet, where intense mass adoption of something that creates very simple and understandable value for everybody in the world who can use it, suddenly understands the the value of what's going on in the background, right? So it's kind of a stepping forward from something that was mostly done by scientists in the back room into the consumer space in a very big way. So Forbes Advisor have some great kind of insights based on some surveys that they did looking at market growth and adoption. So they're predicting the space is going to reach $407 billion, but importantly up from 87 in 2022, right? So massive growth, a doubling of a doubling. A lot of consumers are concerned about misinformation. If you have spent a lot of time using ChatGPT, you realize how quickly you start to believe everything that it tells you. And so the concern is, like, is this a dangerous place to be as humans? Because the minute you can hand off a whole bunch of thinking, like, people tend to gravitate towards that and start focusing on the stuff they want to do. And you'll see from some of the things I'll show you, it's very easy for something to be inaccurate, but couched in terms that sound very, very realistic. It had 1 million users in the first 5 days. It was then beaten by Threads, actually, I think, in terms of acceleration. So it's clearly the year or the 12-month period, should we say, of things growing very, very quickly. Another interesting thing is that self-driving cars are gradually becoming more and more of a thing. And obviously, this whole space and self-driving cars intersect. A lot of businesses are expecting it to help them increase productivity. And there's some data that I'll share a bit later about that and how that works and where it is in the world. A lot of them are adopting AI because of labor shortages. This is an interesting one because of this, right? So 58% of companies are deploying AI and 30% are considering it, and China has the highest volume of AI adoption from a business perspective. But at the same time, there's this concern in the back of our heads around what is this actually going to do for employment. And the World Economic Forum says 400 million workers could be displaced. So on the one hand, you're saying there's not enough people to do the work, so we're going to use AI, but at the same time, potentially displacing 500 million. So it's an interesting paradox that we face. And I was thinking about what Heidi was saying around being in a room and not speaking up. I think this is kind of a test in a way of, whether or not people should be speaking up around this. And a lot of people are taking the stance that AI is particularly bad for humanity. It's a very difficult thing to make a decision on in your life, I think, because there are clearly many benefits of this kind of technology. And it does feel like an absolutely unstoppable force at this point. But then how do you keep the value of human lives and employment and so on at the top of mind as well? And how do you use it responsibly? These are difficult ethical and potentially moral questions that we need to be asking ourselves rather than just blindly diving into something because it's brand new and saves us a lot of time. But a lot of business owners believe it'll improve customer relationships. And I think this is a point towards talking about customer experience, is that it's very clear that our current ways of doing customer experience can't scale, and that they are quite expensive and they are fraught with problems. If you consider call centers, the way that online help tends to work these days, there's a lot of waiting, there's a lot of bots telling you they don't understand what you're asking them. Natural language, as it's been deployed until maybe pre-ChatGPT, has not been that great from a customer experience point of view. But the way that things are now with large language models, it's quite clear that there's no good reason why a bot can't understand what you're asking it and respond really, really well. So I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about practical stuff that you can use on a day-to-day basis. I had to just set the theoretical scene in case anyone criticized me of not telling you that you're about to press a button that's going to destroy humanity. I have to talk about ChatGPT first, but I thought instead of talking about it, I'm just going to show you a little conversation that I had with it this morning, where I was pretending to be this guy who had built this icebox and was selling it on Takealot. But I know nothing about marketing. I love cocktails and I want to make money. So, just kind of that's like who I am. All right. So I start off by saying, here's the URL, give me some CTAs for this product page, right? Because now I figure I need to buy some ads. So tells me it can't browse the internet, but then promptly browses the internet and builds these great CTAs for me. So that's cool, right? So I can see, that's really interesting. I can go buy some Google search ads now. I could have asked it for keywords, but I sort of didn't really want to do that at that point. So I said, cool. But I've got some really hardcore sales targets. So give me some ideas, because, I started asking for CTAs, but I'm not entirely sure what I should be doing. So it says to me, cool, I need to do some limited time offers with urgency. I need to use email marketing. I need to use social media ads, website pop-ups. Then I need to get some influencers and get partnerships around reviews. And then get some micro-influencers, collaborate on recipes, do unboxings and so on. And then do a bunch of retargeting, put in Facebook pixels, etc., dynamic content. So that's great. So now I don't really have any background in marketing. I got an idea roughly, and I could always ask it, like, what is a Facebook pixel? How do I get that? And it'll tell me. So these are the strategies. So I decide actually that I like the social way. So I said, cool, give me some cocktail recipes that work well with the product. I've never told it what the product is, right? So just think about how your interaction with bots used to be versus this. I just gave it a URL. It read that page and figured out that these were like really awesome, ice molds. So boom, gives me recipes. This is the part where I'm like, I love old fashions. So when I see an old fashioned, I take this to be the truth. I don't know necessarily whether this should be the number one cocktail, but it's resonating with me at this point. So I'm like, great. Gives me all these recipes and so on. Now I start telling it how amazing it is, right? So I'm starting to feel gratitude towards like a being in a way, or whatever I'm attributing, right? And I see those ladies laughing there, because if you had like long, deep conversations with ChatGPT where you drift off topic, yeah. So I'm like, but geez, the one thing I do know is that my nephew told me I needed UTMs to know if my campaigns are working, right? So like, how do I do that? And it generates all my UTMs for me in the URL, right? So, and then aside from just giving me the UTMs, it explains what they are and what the different things are, right? It gives me examples, tells me how do I know which is the exact cocktail that drove my sales. So at this point, I'm thinking, sweet, I need some budget. So I ask it to write me an email to explain to our CFO how I'm going to track ROI, okay? Because we had CFO, CMO discussions this morning. And here it is. Here's my whole email, right? So it's like a whole long story about key metrics and what analytics and the time frame and all that kind of stuff, right? So at this point, I think this took me maybe like 11 minutes to have this conversation, right? Now, a lot of people in the marketing industry spend a lot of their time doing this kind of stuff, and it's routine, it's boring, it's dull, it's taxing on a spiritual level to have to write all these CTAs, because you don't write 5, you write 20. Okay, so what problem does this thing solve? And this is like literally the simplest example, right? So HubSpot a couple of days ago announced the integration of AI into their platform. They also released this great kind of marketer's survey around attitudes towards AI and what people are actually using it for today. And the feedback is that you can save 25 to 26 additional days in a year by simply doing some basic things with AI. This is not plugging in massive automation. This is just human beings using it to like cut time. When I pitched this as a concept to my content team, there were like 3 segments. Segment 1 was like, hell yeah, this is great. My life is so cool now because I don't have to do all the stuff that I don't like doing. The other group were like, shit, humanity's under fire, it's going to be the end of us. Like what happens to our jobs? Why do you need us? Because we do this thing, we write social content and so on. So why do you need us if you can tell ChatGPT to do the work? And then the other bunch were like philosophically concerned with the state of the craft and what happens when everything veers towards like this imminent sameness, because it's just like a big giant tumbler rolling garbage over and over again and generating more and more from the same like basic source material, right? These are all the kind of people you're going to have to deal with in your organization one by one, and you need answers for all of those different things, because it's not a magic wand. It's also not going to kill out humanity necessarily yet. And there is a place for craft, but where is that place? That is a very difficult question to answer. So how do marketers use it today? And this survey is pretty current, right? I think it's like maybe a week old, so it's pretty fresh. And they're saying create content, write copy, create images, create outlines. These are really simple things that you don't really even need a pro ChatGPT account for. And there are many other tools, and I'm going to talk through some of those tools for this in a second. What marketing apps are they using? So chatbots, just discussed, text gen tools like Jasper, visual tools. Canva has an AI image generator. There are a lot of things that you can do, not only on the text level, but on image and increasingly video and audio as well. And there's some audio tools. So I'm going to talk about 3 areas, I think, for marketers that there can be an impact. And it's sort of set up, I guess, in the order of like personal to quite far removed in your platform, right? So on the personal side, the content creation and personalization is something that I think anyone can adopt really, really quickly, right? So, for example, SEO content, ad creative, workflow collaboration, all of these tools are available today. And they've popped up, right? So Surfer, ScaleNut, things like Jasper, which is probably one of the most well-known text gens, outranking, which is something that will really help you from a search perspective, and Writesonic. And there are many, many more tools, right? So there's probably another 40 in this category. I'm not highlighting them all, but I'll show you sort of just a view of one of them, which is called Narrato. It does different things for you based on your workflow, right? So you can ask it to write a whole bunch of articles based on something that you need to do. For example, that cocktail recipe that I showed. It can figure out what topics are aligned to your product that you can start building out content for. So building essentially content frameworks around a particular product. It can generate SEO guidelines, keywords, all of that sort of stuff. It can pretty much do real-time analysis of your content and tell you how it's going to rank. So a lot of people who use these tools use it to improve their SERPs. And then images to fill in. And I think the image technology's come a really long way in the past 12 months. It's still not 100% there in terms of that you could use it in an unsupervised manner. And potentially for text as well. A lot of the respondents in this survey were saying that they weren't confident to allow this to run in an autonomous way, because you still need to do some editing and so on. Here's an example of blog content being created with automatic image generation and a view of how it's going to sit from a search perspective and keywords, right? So this is a SaaS. You can go get it today. Your teams can use it. And there are many other tools like it. So what I would suggest is, if you go in this direction, you test. A lot of these have got free trials. Test for a week and pick the one that best suits your organization and your style and how your team's set up and the specific things that you want to get done. There are some challenges though, right? So there are these rising ethical and legal concerns. There are a bunch of class action lawsuits gradually coming against OpenAI for using, I suppose, art and copyrighted materials as source materials in order to generate this kind of content. There are concerns around quality and relevance, and this is, I think like when I speak to humans about what do they do in all of this, they play a curatorship role and they become the thing that checks accuracy and so on. It's not really long until the AI will just do that for you. You can, for example, now in ChatGPT request sources for the generated materials. There's this concern about economic impact and what it going to do for jobs. If you were, let's say, like a 19th century capitalist factory owner seeing this kind of functionality pop up, like, for example, automated knitting machines, there would be no qualms about replacing that entire workforce with machines, right? And one hopes that we have become a slightly softer version of capitalism than that over the past 200 years. But in many instances, definitely not, right? This is going to result in people having to find a different way to create value in organizations. The question is just when and where and to what extent. And then also it creates questions around accountability. So who is really accountable in your content production chain for content that's generated by AI, especially if it's done in an unsupervised manner? So some of these questions need to be answered, I think, before you fully leap into it. So let me talk a little bit about customer journey mapping and personalization. This is the area that I'm most excited about at the moment from a Multichoice perspective and from a marketing perspective, because I think the potential here is really big. So the thing to where we start is that today the majority of journey orchestration systems, customer journey orchestration systems, are rule-based. So people decide what the rules are. It's kind of if this, then that type logic that's been put in this. For example, if you're in Braze or Salesforce Journey Builder or something like that, someone is sitting there building this journey and creating all the forking paths and what happens at different stages of the customer engagement. When you have something that's rules-based, it's a great way to start automating decision-making, but it's a very blunt instrument compared to what AI can do if it starts understanding all of the customer behavior signals rather than, did the person check on, I prefer email or SMS for communications, those kind of things. But understanding digital behavior and then relating that to outcomes and doing very narrow segmentation based on that, but powered by generative creative, which I think is the really important part here. Like for a human to go and build 8,000 creatives for, say, 8,000 different segments in your audience, it's just not practical, right? So you need these two things to be working hand in hand. And here, the space, it's people that you know, right? Braze, Adobe, Salesforce, Thunderhead, and the rest. There are a lot of smaller kind of journey orchestration businesses that are popping up that are going to make their sort of key sales point AI-driven journey orchestration. But I'll get to the moral of the story around this particular category is if you have a piece of tech like Salesforce, AI is going to come to it. You don't have to go and get something to do your AI for you. It's coming to these tools. There's no ways that anyone's going to stay competitive without it over the next year and a half. Like Salesforce have been making announcements like crazy. I think Adobe already has it partly. Braze announced their AI recently. Thunderhead's always been like a bit of a weird outlier, but with a super cool name, so I always include them in these decks just because generally no one knows what it is, but then they go look and they go, it's amazing. And why do we need that? Well, because customer journeys are crazy, right? We're talking about the expansion of complexity in our space. Why? Because customers don't just read a magazine and then walk into a store and buy a product anymore, right? They're all over the show, in social, mobile, everywhere, right? So you've got to be able to track people across all of this. And that data conversation earlier with with Munya and Dawood, the reality is if you don't have a good way to track people across all these journeys, there's no ways you can automate it and personalize it, right? So you have to have your data ready. And this is getting more and more complicated as time goes on. And the media don't necessarily correlates to the media that people were using a couple of years ago, right? So if you think about when everyone was on Facebook and Instagram, and then you think about the difference in the consumption patterns of, say, a TikTok viewer to a Facebook reader or viewer, it's a very different thing that's going on there, right? So it's not only like you can classify everything into website or mobile. There are many different ways of consuming inside of that space, and understanding that is important. So here's what it can do for us, right? It can do dynamic segmentation, which is probably the most important thing, and then predict behavior and respond based on that and generate content. And as I said, if you have platforms that are already in place, very soon, if not already, this is going to be a service for you. It's going to be a kind of utility, right? And it's going to allow you to personalize content. Load all your brand assets, all your messaging, all your video, and that's source material, and it's going to create customized, tailored, creative based on where someone is on the journey. So, and then we get into the space of, I think a lot of the tools that we use today, Google Marketing Platform, Meta, and so on, and they've been working on AI for ages. As Anatan said earlier, they've done a lot of investment over the past 10 years in the AI space. And what you get here, and this is maybe more on the sort of media buying and optimization side, is you're going to get a lot better campaign ROI simply by having these things tweaking and optimizing your campaigns. Sarah pointed out that the MMA is saying like minimum 100% improvement in ROI by deploying AI in the marketing space, right? So it's definitely something that your vendors and your SaaS providers are going to be putting in for you. And it's going to become something that for a while is a highly competitive space until it just becomes the norm, and then everyone's going to take it for granted, right? So fast forward 3 years from now, you'd laugh at someone who doesn't have AI built into your media management tool, your DSP, whatever. So the Trade Desk recently announced that they have an AI optimization kind of thing going on in there. Pixies is something that we're busy doing trials with now, which basically does dynamic segmentation, dynamic creative, and so on. And we have really high expectations for what that thing's going to do. And that plugs into GMP and just runs campaigns on our behalf, right? So I suppose if you're like in the media ops space, the thought process is, how can I use this to increase productivity, etc., right? But don't have the thought process of, well, I'm going to be out of a job, because someone has to keep their eye on this stuff and understand how to instruct it on what to do. So finally, I think where we're going to is it's going to become a utility. You're going to take it for granted. It's going to be a basic expectation in your MarTech. And so on the back of that, it's probably advisable to start focusing more on how do you understand the core concept of what it can do for you, rather than necessarily fussing over like deploying it on large scale on tools. If you don't, if you're already using GMP, for example, then don't spend a lot of time building this out in another space. It's going to come there. It's going to come to Salesforce, etc. If you're a small organization, on the other hand, you get this massive power for like $100 a month subscription, right? And it gives you essentially, I would estimate maybe the equivalent workforce of like a 20, 30 person team, which is really, really good for smaller businesses. So just get your foot in the water. Don't hide away from it. And like, I guess a lot of people who've started using ChatGPT, if you haven't transitioned to this is the most important tool in my life, then maybe what you need to do is try and understand what your needs are, and look at what other tool chain categories there are where AI is available. But it's also a space that's so white hot right now that a lot of these companies, like that I think we got down to, what did Anatan say, like 8-year life expectancy for a business. That's going to go down to like 3 or 4 years in this space now, because there are more AI marketing companies, since November last year, I think, than we've seen in the last 3 years popping up. So it's a bit crazy at the moment. So that's it. Thank you, Heidi, for reminding me to not have thank you. And yeah, thank you very much.